Welcome to One Book, One Coffee, where we explore the depths of literature over a warm cup, giving you insights and revelations that only the pages of a great book can offer. Today, you've chosen something truly special. By picking up Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig, you've stepped away from the noise of endless notifications and the allure of the next streaming episode. Instead, you've chosen to engage with a narrative that challenges how we perceive quality, life, and even the nature of our own minds. This choice sets you apart as someone who cherishes depth and growth. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is not just a book about fixing bikes, but a philosophical journey that explores the very essence of quality, existence, and the balance between technology and humanity. Its profound reach is endorsed by the likes of Bill Gates, who once cited it as an essential read that transformed his thinking about life. This remarkable endorsement speaks volumes about the book's impact. Robert Pirsig, the author, was a philosopher and writer who faced significant personal challenges. His struggle with mental health and a quest for meaning are intricately woven into this narrative. Pirsig's own experiences with a motorcycle trip across America with his son serve as the backbone for exploring profound philosophical questions, making it a deeply personal and enlightening read. Now, a quick note before we dive in. This is a detailed chapter-by-chapter walkthrough, so it's going to be a longer session. Take your time with it. There's no rush. If you need to step away, save this video to your watch later or forward the link to yourself on WhatsApp so you can pick up right where you left off. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's walk through this book together, chapter by chapter, idea by idea. Let's begin. A journey into the nature of quality. Robert Pirsig, a philosopher afflicted by personal mental health struggles, used a cross-country motorcycle trip with his son to explore philosophical themes, resulting in an intimate and intellectual masterpiece. Picture this. You're sitting across from me with a warm cup of coffee. Maybe it's early morning and the world outside is just beginning to stir. I want to tell you about a journey that changed how millions of people think about life, work, and what it means to truly understand something. This is the story of Robert Pirsig's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And trust me, despite what the title might suggest, this isn't really about motorcycles at all. Imagine you're planning a cross-country motorcycle trip with your 11-year-old son. You've got your route mapped out, your gear packed, and you're ready to hit the open road from Minnesota to California. But what if I told you that this seemingly simple father-son adventure would become one of the most profound philosophical journeys ever put to paper? That's exactly what happened to Robert Pirsig in the summer that would reshape his understanding of everything. Now, think about this for a moment. How often do we embark on journeys expecting one thing and discovering something completely different? Pirsig thought he was taking his son Chris on a memorable motorcycle adventure, but what he actually discovered was a way to bridge one of the oldest divides in human thinking. The road ahead, both literally and philosophically, would force him to confront questions that have puzzled humanity for centuries. The literal journey begins simply enough. Picture two motorcycles cutting through the American heartland, the rhythmic hum of engines, the changing landscape rolling by mile after mile. Pirsig and his son Chris are joined by friends John and Sylvia Sutherland, and from the very beginning, we see something fascinating emerge. John, you see, has a complicated relationship with his motorcycle. When something goes wrong, he's frustrated, almost personally offended by the machine's refusal to cooperate. He wants it fixed, but he doesn't want to understand how it works. He sees the motorcycle as something separate from himself, a tool that should simply function without requiring his deeper engagement. But Pirsig sees something entirely different when he looks at that same machine. Where John sees an obstinate piece of metal, Pirsig sees an opportunity for understanding, a doorway into something much larger. This difference in perspective becomes the launching pad for everything that follows, because it represents one of the most fundamental splits in how human beings approach the world around them. Here's where it gets really interesting. and I want you to think about your own life as we explore this. Pirsig introduces us to what he calls the classical and romantic modes of understanding. The romantic mode is all about immediate experience, feelings, intuition, the whole gestalt of a moment. It's the person who loves the feeling of wind rushing past on a motorcycle, who's moved by the beauty of a mountain vista, who experiences life in rich, emotional, holistic ways. John Sutherland represents this beautifully. He wants to enjoy the ride, feel the freedom, experience the journey without getting bogged down in mechanical details. The classical mode, on the other hand, is analytical, systematic, concerned with underlying structures and relationships. It's the mode that wants to understand how things work, that sees beauty in the elegant solution to a problem, that finds satisfaction in the logical progression from cause to effect. This is Pirsig's natural territory, the realm of someone who can diagnose a motorcycle's problems by listening to subtle changes in engine rhythm. Now, here's the crucial insight that sets the stage for everything to come. These two modes aren't just different ways of thinking about motorcycles. They represent a fundamental divide that runs through all of human culture. Think about it in today's terms. We see this split everywhere. There's the person who loves using their smartphone for its sleek design and intuitive interface, and there's the person who wants to understand the code that makes it work. There's the art lover who's moved to tears by a painting, and there's the art historian who analyzes brush techniques and cultural context. There's the music fan who gets lost in a song's emotional impact, and there's the audio engineer who marvels at the production techniques. But here's what Pirsig realized, and this is where the philosophical landscape of his journey really opens up. This division between classical and romantic understanding isn't just a difference of preference. It's become a kind of cultural schizophrenia that's tearing apart our ability to live integrated, meaningful lives. We've created a world where you're supposed to be either the dreamy artist or the analytical scientist, either the person who feels or the person who thinks, either someone who appreciates beauty or someone who understands function. The road ahead, both on this motorcycle journey and in the pages of this book, promises to heal this artificial divide. Pirsig isn't content to simply describe the problem. He's going to take us on a quest to find what he calls quality with a capital Q, something that exists before the split between subject and object, something that bridges the classical and romantic modes of understanding. Think about a moment in your own life when you've experienced something that felt both beautiful and true, both emotionally moving and intellectually satisfying. Maybe it was solving a particularly elegant problem at work, or watching a craftsperson who clearly loved their trade create something both functional and beautiful. Maybe it was a conversation that felt both deeply personal and universally relevant. These moments point toward what Pirsig is seeking, a way of being in the world that doesn't force us to choose between thinking and feeling, between analysis and appreciation. As we prepare to follow this journey through the American landscape and the landscape of ideas, we're not just passengers on a motorcycle trip. We're explorers setting out to discover whether it's possible to live with a kind of integrated attention that honors both the romantic's appreciation for immediate experience and the classical mind's need for understanding. The road ahead promises to be challenging, sometimes difficult, but ultimately transformative, just like the best journeys always are. Picture this. You're sitting across from me with your favorite cup of coffee, and I want to tell you about something that completely changed how I think about life, work, and everything in between. It's about a motorcycle, but it's not really about a motorcycle at all. Confused, perfect. That's exactly where Robert Pirsig wants us to start. When Pirsig takes us on that cross-country journey with his son Chris, riding from Minneapolis to San Francisco, he's not just documenting a road trip. That motorcycle beneath him becomes something far more profound than a machine with two wheels and an engine. Think about this for a moment. What if I told you that every time you interact with technology, every time you fix something that's broken, Every time you try to understand how anything works, you're actually engaging in a deeply philosophical act. Sounds a bit grand, doesn't it? But that's exactly what Pirsig is getting at. The motorcycle in this story represents our entire relationship with the modern world. It's the perfect symbol because it sits right at the intersection of art and science, of feeling and thinking, of the romantic and the classical. Now, you might be wondering what I mean by romantic and classical here, because these aren't terms we usually apply to motorcycles. But stay with me, because this is where things get really interesting. Pirsig introduces us to two fundamentally different ways of seeing the world. The romantic view sees the motorcycle as a whole beautiful thing. It's about the wind in your hair, the freedom of the open road, the pure joy of movement. The romantic doesn't want to know about compression ratios or valve adjustments. They just want a ride. And there's nothing wrong with that perspective. It's immediate, it's felt, it's experienced rather than analyzed. But then there's the classical view, which sees the motorcycle as a complex system of interconnected parts. It's about understanding how the carburetor feeds fuel to the engine, how the electrical system creates the spark, how all these components work together in harmony. The classical mind wants to take things apart, understand them, fix them when they break. Here's where it gets fascinating. Most of us live in one camp or the other, and we often look at the other side with suspicion or even disdain. The romantic thinks the classical person is cold, mechanical, missing the point entirely. The classical person thinks the romantic is naive, unwilling to deal with reality. Sound familiar? Think about the last time you had to call tech support, or the last time someone tried to explain to you how your smartphone actually works. Did you find yourself tuning out, or did you lean in with curiosity? Pirsig's genius is showing us that this division is artificial and ultimately destructive. The motorcycle doesn't care whether you approach it romantically or classically. It needs both perspectives to truly function. You need the classical understanding to maintain it properly, to diagnose problems, to keep it running. But you also need the romantic appreciation to understand why it matters, why it's beautiful, why it's worth caring for in the first place. Let me give you a modern example that might hit closer to home. Think about your relationship with your smartphone. Most of us use these devices romantically. We love the sleek design, the way they connect us to people we care about, the magic of having the world's information at our fingertips. But when something goes wrong, when an app crashes or the battery starts dying too quickly, we're forced into a classical relationship with it. Suddenly we're troubleshooting, checking settings, maybe even researching how lithium-ion batteries degrade over time. The problem is that most of us resist this classical engagement. We want the magic without understanding the mechanism. We want the benefits without the responsibility of truly knowing what we're dealing with. And this, Pirsig suggests, is a recipe for alienation and frustration. But here's the beautiful thing about the motorcycle metaphor. It shows us a different way. When Pirsig stops to adjust his bike, when he cleans the spark plugs or adjusts the chain tension, he's not just maintaining a machine. He's participating in a dialogue between mind and matter, between intention and reality. He's practicing what he calls the art of motorcycle maintenance, which isn't really about motorcycles at all. It's about approaching everything in your life with both technical competence and genuine care. It's about refusing to accept the false choice between thinking and feeling, between understanding and appreciating. When you fix your motorcycle with this mindset, you're not just solving a mechanical problem. You're engaging in an act of love, an expression of quality, a small but significant way of making the world work better. Now think about your own life. What are your motorcycles? What are the things you interact with daily that you could approach with this integrated perspective? Maybe it's your work, where you could combine analytical thinking with genuine passion. Maybe it's your relationships, where you could balance emotional connection with practical understanding. Maybe it's your home, where you could see both the systems that keep it running and the sanctuary it provides. The motorcycle teaches us that quality isn't something you add to a thing after it's made. Quality emerges from the relationship between the maker and the made, between the rider and the ridden, between you and whatever you're engaged with. It's not a feature, it's a way of being. This is why Pirsig's motorcycle becomes such a powerful symbol. It represents the possibility of healing the split between mind and matter, between art and science, between who we are and what we do. Every time he kicks that engine to life, every time he navigates a mountain curve with skill and attention, he's demonstrating that we don't have to choose between understanding and experiencing the world. We can, if we're willing to do the work, have both. And that, my friend, is a lesson worth taking on any journey, whether you're riding cross-country on a motorcycle or simply trying to live a more integrated, thoughtful life right where you are. Picture this. You're sitting across from a friend who's been through something profound, something that changed them completely, and they're finally ready to tell you about the person they used to be. That's exactly what happens when Pirsig introduces us to Phaedrus, and let me tell you, this is where the book takes a turn that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about identity, madness, and the pursuit of truth. Phaedrus isn't just a character in this story. He's Pirsig himself, or rather, who Pirsig used to be before electroshock therapy essentially erased that version of himself. Think about that for a moment. Imagine if someone told you that the person you were 5 years ago was so different, so intense in their pursuit of understanding, that they literally drove themselves to what society calls madness. That's the ghost Pirsig is wrestling with throughout this entire journey, and it's absolutely haunting. The name Phaedrus comes from Plato's dialogues, and this isn't accidental. In Plato's work, Phaedrus was the young man who engaged Socrates in discussions about love, beauty, and the nature of truth. But Pirsig's Phaedrus is different. He's not the student but the obsessed seeker, the one who pushed too hard and went too far. He was a philosophy instructor who became consumed with a single question. What is quality? What makes something good, beautiful, or right? Now you might think this sounds like an academic exercise, but for Phaedrus, it became a matter of life and death. Here's what's fascinating about Phaedrus's story. He wasn't content with the traditional answers philosophy provided. He looked around at the academic world and saw something deeply wrong with how we approach truth and understanding. The universities were teaching students to analyze and dissect everything, to break down beauty and quality into component parts, but in doing so, they were killing the very thing they claimed to study. It's like trying to understand the beauty of a butterfly by pinning it to a board and cataloging its wing patterns. You might learn something, but you've destroyed what made it beautiful in the first place. Phaedrus saw this happening everywhere. Students would come to his classes alive with curiosity and passion, and the educational system would systematically drain that life out of them, replacing wonder with formulas, intuition with rigid methodology. He watched bright minds being taught to doubt their own perceptions, to distrust their immediate sense of what was good or beautiful or right. Think about your own education for a moment. How many times were you told that your gut reaction wasn't valid, that you needed to justify everything through established frameworks and methodologies? This is where Phaedrus's obsession became dangerous. He started to see that the entire Western philosophical tradition from Aristotle onward had made a fundamental error. It had separated subject from object, mind from matter, quality from quantity, creating artificial divisions that didn't actually exist in reality. When you experience something beautiful, a sunset, a piece of music, a perfectly tuned motorcycle engine, you don't experience it as separate from yourself. The beauty isn't out there, waiting to be analyzed. It emerges in the relationship between you and what you're experiencing. But here's the thing that drove Phaedrus over the edge. He couldn't prove this insight using the very tools that the insight revealed to be flawed. It's like trying to use a broken ruler to measure how broken it is. The academic establishment demanded that he present his ideas about quality using their methods, their language, their framework. But his entire point was that their framework was the problem. Imagine trying to explain the taste of chocolate to someone using only mathematical equations. You might be able to describe the chemical compounds, the neural responses, but you'd completely miss what chocolate actually tastes like. This is what makes Phaedrus such a tragic figure. He had glimpsed something profound about the nature of reality and human experience, but he couldn't communicate it without betraying it. The more he tried to explain quality using traditional philosophical methods, the more he killed the very thing he was trying to describe. It's like trying to capture lightning in a jar. The moment you contain it, it's no longer lightning. Now, think about this in terms of your own life. How often do you find yourself in situations where you know something is right or wrong, good or bad, but you can't explain why? Maybe it's a relationship that looks perfect on paper but feels wrong, or a job that meets all your practical criteria but leaves you feeling empty. Maybe it's a piece of art that moves you in ways you can't articulate, or a decision that makes no logical sense but feels absolutely correct. Phaedrus was trying to understand and validate these kinds of experiences in a world that only values what can be measured and proven. The tragedy is that Phaedrus's pursuit of truth became so intense, so all-consuming, that it isolated him from the very quality he was trying to understand. He became like a man trying to catch his own shadow. The harder he chased it, the faster it ran away from him. His relationships suffered, his teaching suffered, and eventually his sanity suffered. The irony is profound. In seeking to understand what makes life meaningful and beautiful, he lost touch with the meaning and beauty in his own life. This is the ghost that haunts Pirsig throughout the motorcycle journey with his son Chris. Phaedrus represents both the danger and the necessity of asking fundamental questions about existence. He's a warning about what happens when the pursuit of truth becomes disconnected from the lived experience of being human. But he's also a reminder that these questions matter, that the search for quality and meaning isn't just an intellectual exercise. It's what makes us human. As we continue this journey with Pirsig, we'll see how he tries to integrate the insights of Phaedrus without losing himself in the same obsessive pursuit. The question becomes, how do you honor the search for truth while staying grounded in the simple, immediate experience of being alive? How do you think deeply without thinking yourself into madness? These aren't just philosophical puzzles. They're practical challenges we all face in our quest to live meaningful, authentic lives. Picture yourself sitting across from a friend who's just had one of those light bulb moments about how the world works, and they're leaning forward with that excited gleam in their eyes, coffee growing cold as they try to share this revelation with you. That's exactly what Robert Pirsig does in this pivotal section of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And honestly, it's one of those insights that once you see it, you can't unsee it. So here's the setup. Pirsig is riding across America with his son Chris, and they're traveling with this couple, John and Sylvia Sutherland. Now, John's motorcycle keeps breaking down, which is frustrating enough. But what really gets to Pirsig is John's complete lack of interest in understanding why it's breaking down or how to fix it. John just wants the thing to work, period. He doesn't want to get his hands dirty, doesn't want to learn about carburetors or spark plugs, and certainly doesn't want to spend his vacation thinking about mechanical systems. Sound familiar? We all know someone like John, right? But here's where it gets fascinating. Pirsig realizes that this isn't just about motorcycle maintenance. This is about two completely different ways of seeing and understanding reality itself. He calls them classical and romantic understanding, and trust me, these aren't just fancy academic categories. These are the two fundamental lenses through which every single one of us views the world, often without even realizing it. Let's start with classical understanding, because that's Pirsig's territory, and frankly, it's probably the less popular of the two in our culture. Classical understanding is all about the underlying form, the structure, the system beneath the surface. It's analytical, rational, and it loves to break things down into their component parts to see how they work. Think about a classical thinker looking at a motorcycle. They don't just see a shiny machine that gets you from point A to point B, they see a complex system of interrelated parts, each with a specific function, all working together according to certain principles of physics and engineering. Now here's what's beautiful about this perspective. The classical mind finds genuine beauty in understanding how things work. There's a deep satisfaction in tracing the logical connections, in seeing the elegant simplicity of a well-designed system. When Pirsig talks about adjusting a motorcycle's timing or cleaning a carburetor, he's not just doing maintenance. He's engaging in a kind of dialogue with the machine, understanding its needs, respecting its design. But then there's romantic understanding, and this is where most of us probably feel more at home. Romantic understanding is immediate, intuitive, and emotional. It's about the whole experience, not the parts. It's about how something makes you feel, what it means to you, the story it tells. A romantic thinker looks at that same motorcycle and sees freedom, adventure, the wind in their hair, the open road stretching ahead. They see beauty, but it's the beauty of the experience, not the beauty of the mechanism. Now think about this for a moment. Which one sounds more like you? When your phone stops working, are you the type who immediately starts troubleshooting, checking settings, maybe even looking up technical forums online? Or are you more likely to feel frustrated and just want someone else to make it work again? There's no right answer here, but understanding which tendency you lean toward can be incredibly revealing. Here's where Pirsig's insight gets really interesting, and honestly, a bit troubling. He argues that our culture has created this massive divide between these two ways of understanding, and we've somehow decided that they're not just different, but incompatible. We've got the technical people over here, the engineers and mechanics and programmers, who understand how things work but are often dismissed as lacking creativity or human warmth. And then we've got the artists and humanists over there, who understand beauty and meaning and emotion, but often pride themselves on being non-technical. But wait, doesn't this seem crazy when you really think about it? Why should understanding how something works make it less beautiful? Why should appreciating beauty and meaning require ignorance of underlying principles? Pirsig uses this gorgeous example of looking at a flower. The romantic sees its beauty, its delicate petals, the way it moves in the breeze. But does knowing about photosynthesis, about cellular structure, about the evolutionary history that shaped those petals, does any of that make the flower less beautiful? Or does it add layers of wonder to what we're seeing? This divide shows up everywhere in our modern world. Think about how we talk about technology. We've got this weird cultural narrative where you're either a tech person who understands computers and programming, or you're a regular person who just wants things to work without having to think about them. But this creates all sorts of problems. People feel helpless and frustrated when their technology doesn't work because they've been told that understanding it isn't for them. Meanwhile, the people who do understand the technology often lose sight of why it matters to human beings in the first place. Or consider how we approach our cars. Most of us have this purely romantic relationship with our vehicles. We want them to be reliable, comfortable, maybe stylish, but we don't want to think about what's happening under the hood. But then when something goes wrong, we're completely at the mercy of mechanics, unable to even communicate effectively about the problem because we don't share a common language of understanding. Pirsig suggests that this split is actually a relatively recent development in human history. For most of human existence, the people who made things were also the people who used them and appreciated them. The craftsman who built a chair understood both the joinery techniques and the beauty of the finished piece. The cook who prepared a meal understood both the chemistry of cooking and the pleasure of eating. There wasn't this artificial separation between technical understanding and human appreciation. So what's the solution? Well, this is where Pirsig's journey really begins, because he's not content to just point out the problem. He wants to find a way to bridge these two modes of understanding, to show that they can not only coexist but actually enhance each other. He calls this synthesis quality, and it's going to be the central theme of everything that follows in the book. But even before we get to that grand synthesis, there's something practical and immediate we can take from this insight. We can start paying attention to our own tendencies and maybe pushing ourselves gently in the other direction sometimes. If you're naturally more romantic in your understanding, maybe next time something breaks, instead of immediately calling for help, you could spend a few minutes trying to understand what might be going wrong. If you're naturally more classical, maybe you could take a moment to appreciate not just how something works, but what it means to the people who use it. Because here's what Pirsig is really getting at, and what makes this so relevant to our lives today. The world is becoming increasingly complex, and we need both kinds of understanding to navigate it successfully. We need the classical understanding to build better systems, solve technical problems, and make informed decisions. But we also need the romantic understanding to remember why any of this matters, to stay connected to our humanity, and to create meaning in our lives. As we continue on this journey with Pirsig, keep this framework in mind, because everything that follows, every insight about quality and craftsmanship and the art of living well, is going to build on this foundation of bringing together these two ways of seeing the world. Picture this. You're sitting in your favorite coffee shop, and someone walks up to you and asks, "What is quality?" You might pause, coffee cup halfway to your lips, and realize you're about to stumble into one of the most fascinating philosophical rabbit holes ever explored. This is exactly where Robert Pirsig takes us in his relentless pursuit to define something we all recognize but struggle to articulate. Now, think about this for a moment. You walk into a restaurant and immediately sense whether it has quality or not. You pick up a tool and know instantly if it's well made. You listen to a piece of music and feel that ineffable something that separates the extraordinary from the merely adequate. But try to explain what that something actually is, and you'll find yourself grasping at air. Pirsig discovered this maddening paradox when he was teaching rhetoric and composition, watching his students struggle with assignments about quality writing. They could recognize it, they could feel it, but they couldn't define it. Imagine being a teacher standing in front of a classroom, asking students to write with quality, only to realize you can't actually tell them what quality is. It's like asking someone to paint with blue while refusing to explain what blue looks like. This was Pirsig's dilemma, and it nearly drove him to madness. Literally. He became so obsessed with this question that it consumed his thinking, his teaching, his very sense of reality. The conventional approach to understanding quality usually falls into one of two camps, and both feel incomplete. On one side, we have the classical view that says quality is objective, measurable, something that exists independently of our perception. Think of engineering specifications, chemical purity, mathematical precision. A gear either fits or it doesn't. A measurement is either accurate or it's not. This approach loves definitions, categories, and systematic analysis. It's the world of the mechanic checking torque specifications and the scientist measuring molecular structures. But then there's the romantic view, which insists that quality is purely subjective, existing only in our emotional response to things. It's the feeling you get when you hear your favorite song, the way a perfectly prepared meal makes you close your eyes in appreciation, the inexplicable draw of a piece of art that speaks to your soul. This perspective says quality can't be measured or systematized because it lives in the realm of feeling, intuition, and personal experience. Here's where Pirsig's insight becomes revolutionary. What if this entire debate is missing the point? What if quality isn't something that can be neatly categorized as either objective or subjective? What if it's something more fundamental than both? Consider this. When you're working on your motorcycle and you feel that moment when everything clicks into place, when the machine responds exactly as it should, when there's a perfect harmony between your understanding and the mechanical reality in front of you. Is that feeling subjective? Well, yes, you're experiencing it. But is the mechanical precision objective? Absolutely. The revelation is that quality exists at the intersection of these two worlds, not in one or the other. Pirsig realized that quality isn't a thing at all. It's not a property that objects possess or emotions that subjects feel. Instead, quality is the relationship between observer and observed, between mind and matter, between the classical and romantic ways of seeing. It's the moment of contact, the point of intersection where consciousness meets reality. Think about a master craftsman at work. Watch a skilled carpenter shaping wood, a chef preparing a meal, or a musician playing an instrument. What you're witnessing isn't just technical skill or emotional expression in isolation. You're seeing quality emerge from the dynamic relationship between knowledge and intuition, between systematic understanding and felt experience. The craftsman knows the properties of the wood and feels its grain. The chef understands chemical reactions and tastes with trained intuition. The musician comprehends musical theory and channels pure emotion. This insight has profound implications for how we approach our daily lives. In our modern world, we've become obsessed with metrics, measurements, and quantifiable outcomes. We rate everything from our sleep quality to our productivity, from our relationships to our happiness. But Pirsig suggests that true quality emerges not from measurement but from engagement, not from analysis but from presence. Consider how this applies to something as simple as making coffee. You could approach it purely analytically, measuring water temperature to the degree, timing extraction to the second, calculating precise ratios of coffee to water. Or you could go purely by feel, trusting your senses and intuition. But the highest quality coffee comes from understanding the science and trusting your palate, from knowing the principles and being present to the moment of creation. Now think about this in terms of your work, your relationships, your creative endeavors. Quality isn't something you achieve by following a formula or by abandoning all structure for pure spontaneity. It emerges when you bring both systematic knowledge and intuitive awareness to bear on whatever you're doing. It's the programmer who understands algorithms but also feels the elegance of clean code. It's the teacher who knows pedagogical theory but also connects authentically with students. It's the parent who reads child development books but also trusts their instinctive understanding of their child. Pirsig's pursuit of quality ultimately led him to understand that it's not something we can capture or possess. It's something we participate in. It's not a destination but a way of traveling. Quality is what happens when we bring our full attention and care to the present moment, whether we're adjusting a motorcycle's carburetor or having a conversation with a friend. This understanding transforms how we approach everything. Instead of asking, "How can I achieve quality?" we might ask, "How can I be present to quality as it emerges?" Instead of trying to manufacture quality through better systems or more intense feelings, we can learn to recognize and participate in the quality that's always available when we bring our complete attention to what we're doing. As we continue our journey through Pirsig's insights, we'll discover how this understanding of quality as relationship, rather than thing, opens up entirely new ways of seeing technology, creativity, and the very nature of reality itself. Picture this. You're sitting at your kitchen table, smartphone buzzing with notifications, laptop humming quietly beside you, and maybe you're even listening to this on wireless earbuds. We're surrounded by technology, aren't we? Yet how many of us actually understand how any of these devices work? This tension between living with technology and understanding it sits at the very heart of what Pirsig explores when he talks about balancing technical and humanistic perspectives. You know, when Pirsig first wrote about this back in the 70s, personal computers were still science fiction for most people. But his insights feel almost prophetic today. He saw this coming divide between what he called the romantic and classical ways of understanding the world, and nowhere is this more apparent than in how we relate to our machines. Think about your relationship with your car for a moment. When something goes wrong, do you pop the hood and start investigating? Or do you immediately reach for your phone to call a mechanic? There's no judgment here, but Pirsig would say this choice reveals something fundamental about how you see the world. The person who opens the hood is operating from what he calls the classical mindset, seeking to understand the underlying structure, the cause and effect relationships that make the machine work. The person who calls the mechanic is operating from the romantic perspective, seeing the car as a complete entity that either works or doesn't, without much interest in the messy details underneath. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Pirsig argues that both perspectives are necessary, but our modern world has created an artificial split between them. We've somehow convinced ourselves that you're either a tech person or you're not, that you either understand machines or you appreciate beauty, but rarely both. But think about this for a second. Isn't this division actually impoverishing both sides? Consider the smartphone in your pocket. From a purely technical standpoint, it's an absolute marvel of engineering. Billions of transistors working in perfect harmony, radio waves carrying your voice across continents in milliseconds, algorithms processing your touch inputs faster than you can think. But from a humanistic perspective, it's also a window into human connection, a canvas for creativity, a tool for learning and expression. Why should we have to choose between appreciating its technical brilliance and its human significance? Pirsig tells the story of his friend John, who becomes frustrated when his motorcycle develops problems. John loves riding, loves the freedom and the wind and the romance of the open road, but he has zero interest in understanding how the machine actually works. When something breaks, it feels like a personal betrayal. The motorcycle has violated the romantic ideal by forcing him to confront its mechanical reality. Meanwhile, Pirsig himself finds deep satisfaction in the methodical process of troubleshooting, in understanding each system and how they interact. For him, the technical understanding doesn't diminish the romance, it enhances it. But here's what's brilliant about Pirsig's insight. He doesn't just say both perspectives are valid and leave it at that. He argues that the highest form of engagement with technology comes when we integrate both approaches, when we can appreciate the elegant logic of a well-designed system and the human purposes it serves, when we can understand how something works and why it matters. Let me give you a modern example that might resonate. Think about social media algorithms. Most people experience these purely from the romantic perspective. The algorithm is a mysterious black box that either shows you content you like or it doesn't. When it works well, it feels magical. When it doesn't, it feels broken or even malicious. But what if more people understood how these algorithms actually work? Not the complex mathematical details, but the basic principles. That they're optimized for engagement, that they learn from your behavior, that they're designed to keep you scrolling. Suddenly, the romantic experience becomes more informed. You might still enjoy social media, but you're not at its mercy in the same way. This is what Pirsig means when he talks about quality with a capital Q. It's not just technical excellence, and it's not just aesthetic appeal. It's the harmony that emerges when technical mastery serves human purposes, when the how and the why work together in perfect balance. Now you might be thinking, this sounds great in theory, but I don't have time to become an expert in everything I use. And you're absolutely right. Pirsig isn't suggesting we all need to become engineers, but he is suggesting that we can cultivate what we might call technical curiosity, alongside our appreciation for the human dimensions of technology. This might mean taking a moment to understand why your GPS chooses certain routes, or learning the basics of how encryption protects your messages, or simply paying attention to the craft that goes into well-designed software. It's about developing respect for the technical achievement while never losing sight of the human story. The beautiful thing is that this integration works both ways. Engineers and programmers who cultivate the romantic perspective create better technology. They design with empathy, considering not just whether something can be built, but whether it should be, and how it will affect the humans who use it. Think about the difference between software that feels clunky and mechanical versus software that feels intuitive and almost alive. The difference usually comes from developers who understand both the technical constraints and the human experience. As we wrap up this exploration, consider how you might bring more of this integrated perspective into your own life. The next time you encounter a piece of technology that frustrates you, try asking not just, "Why isn't this working?" but "How might this have been designed differently?" When you use something that delights you, try wondering, What technical choices made this experience possible? You're not trying to become a technician. You're trying to become a more complete human being in a technological world. Because ultimately, that's what Pirsig is really talking about: wholeness. The healing of artificial divisions that impoverish our experience of the world. Technology isn't separate from humanity. It's one of humanity's greatest expressions. And the more we can see it that way, the richer our lives become. You know that feeling when you're trying to solve a problem and you just hit a wall? Your computer freezes right before you save an important document. Your car makes that weird noise that no mechanic can figure out. Or you're staring at a blank page trying to write something meaningful, and the words just won't come. We've all been there, and our first instinct is usually to fight it, to force our way through, to get frustrated and maybe even give up entirely. But what if I told you that this feeling of being stuck isn't your enemy at all? What if it's actually pointing you towards something profound? This is exactly what Robert Pirsig discovered during those long motorcycle rides across America, and it's one of the most transformative insights in Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance. Picture this. You're working on your motorcycle, trying to remove a stubborn screw that just won't budge. You try harder, apply more force, maybe even get a bit angry at the thing. But Pirsig suggests something radical here. He says that the moment you feel truly stuck, completely at a loss for what to do next, you're actually standing at the threshold of genuine discovery. Think about this for a moment. When everything is going smoothly, when you're just following the manual step by step, are you really learning anything new? Are you growing? Probably not. You're just executing a predetermined sequence like a computer program running its code. But when you get stuck, really stuck, something different happens. Your automatic responses fail. Your usual bag of tricks comes up empty. And in that moment of genuine puzzlement, your mind has to do something it rarely does. It has to become truly creative. Pirsig tells the story of working on his motorcycle when he encounters a screw that's been stripped and painted over so many times that no conventional tool will grip it. His first reaction is frustration, that familiar feeling we all know. But then he does something interesting. Instead of forcing it or giving up, he sits with the problem. He really looks at it. He lets his mind wander around the edges of the difficulty, not attacking it head-on but approaching it sideways, almost playfully. Now, here's where it gets fascinating. In that state of relaxed attention, not trying to force a solution but not giving up either, new possibilities begin to emerge. Maybe he could file a new groove in the screw head. Maybe he could drill it out. Maybe there's a completely different approach he hasn't considered. The key insight is that these creative solutions only become visible when you stop fighting the problem and start dancing with it instead. This reminds me of something that happens all the time in our digital age. You're working on a project, maybe designing something or coding, and you hit what programmers call a bug that just won't resolve. You can spend hours trying the same approaches over and over, getting more frustrated each time. But experienced developers know something that Pirsig understood about motorcycle maintenance. The bug isn't the enemy. The bug is information. It's telling you something about your assumptions, about the gaps in your understanding, about new directions you haven't explored yet. But here's what's really beautiful about Pirsig's insight. He's not just talking about mechanical problems or technical challenges. He's describing a fundamental pattern of how growth and creativity work in every area of life. Think about a relationship that's hit a rough patch. Your usual ways of communicating aren't working anymore. You feel stuck, maybe even hopeless. The conventional wisdom might be to try harder to push through or to just accept that this is how things are now. But Pirsig would suggest a different approach. Sit with the stuckness. Really examine it. What is this impasse trying to teach you about yourself, about your partner, about the nature of human connection? When you approach problems this way, something almost magical happens. The very thing that seemed like an obstacle becomes a doorway. That stripped screw becomes an opportunity to learn new techniques, to develop patience, to understand the machine more deeply. That relationship conflict becomes a chance to discover new ways of being together, new depths of intimacy and understanding that weren't possible when everything was running smoothly. This connects to something Zen masters have known for centuries. The path is the destination. The difficulties aren't obstacles to enlightenment, they are enlightenment. But Pirsig brings this ancient wisdom down to earth, makes it practical and accessible. You don't need to sit in meditation for years to understand this principle. You can discover it in your garage, working on your motorcycle, or at your kitchen table, trying to fix a broken appliance. The modern world, with its emphasis on efficiency and quick fixes, has largely forgotten this wisdom. We want solutions, and we want them now. We've created a culture that sees problems as inconveniences to be eliminated as quickly as possible. But what if we've got it backwards? What if problems are actually invitations to grow, to learn, to become more than we were before we encountered them? Consider how this applies to the creative process. Every artist, every writer, every innovator knows the terror of the blank canvas, the empty page, the unsolved challenge. But the ones who create something truly original, truly meaningful, are the ones who learn to embrace that terror, to sit with it, to let it teach them something new. They understand that creativity doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from being willing to live with the questions long enough for something unexpected to emerge. This is why Pirsig's motorcycle becomes such a perfect metaphor for life itself. A motorcycle is a complex system where everything is interconnected. When something goes wrong, you can't just ignore it or force your way through it. You have to understand the relationships between all the parts, the subtle ways that one component affects another. And most importantly, you have to develop what Pirsig calls gumption. That quality of mind that allows you to persist with problems not through brute force, but through patient, caring attention. So the next time you find yourself truly stuck, whether it's with a machine, a relationship, a creative project, or just life in general, remember Pirsig's wisdom. Don't immediately reach for the bigger hammer or the quick fix. Instead, take a breath. Sit with the stuckness. Let it teach you something about the nature of the problem, about your own assumptions and limitations, about new possibilities you haven't yet imagined. Because in that moment of genuine not knowing, in that space between the problem and its solution, that's where the real magic happens. That's where transformation begins. Picture this. You're sitting in a college classroom, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, taking notes on something you'll probably forget within a week of the final exam. The professor drones on about facts, formulas, and theories, but something feels missing, doesn't it? You can't quite put your finger on it, but there's this nagging sense that education is supposed to be about more than just memorizing information and regurgitating it on command. Well, Robert Pirsig felt that same unease, and in this pivotal section of Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance, he takes us deep into what he calls the Church of Reason, a brilliant critique of how our education system has turned rationality into a kind of sterile religion. Now think about this for a moment. When Pirsig uses the term Church of Reason, he's not being flippant or disrespectful. He's pointing out something profound about how we've elevated rational, analytical thinking to an almost sacred status in our culture. Just like a church has its rituals, doctrines, and unquestionable authorities, our educational institutions have created their own version of worship. Except instead of praying, we're analyzing, categorizing, and breaking everything down into neat little boxes. Pirsig shares a story from his own teaching experience that perfectly captures this problem. He describes standing in front of a classroom full of students who were dutifully taking notes, following the prescribed curriculum, and jumping through all the academic hoops. But their eyes were dead. They were going through the motions of learning without any real engagement or passion. It was like watching people attend church out of obligation rather than genuine spiritual hunger. The students had learned to worship at the altar of grades, credentials, and approved knowledge, but they'd lost touch with the actual joy and wonder of discovery. This reminds me of something we see everywhere today. How many times have you met someone who's incredibly educated on paper, multiple degrees, impressive credentials, but when you try to have a real conversation with them about life, creativity, or even their own field of study, they seem oddly disconnected? They can recite facts and theories all day long, but ask them what it all means or how it connects to the human experience, and suddenly they're at a loss. They've been trained to think within the rigid structures of their discipline, but they've never learned to think outside those boundaries. Pirsig argues that this worship of pure rationality has created what he calls a knife that cuts reality into artificial pieces. Think of it this way. When you're trying to understand a beautiful sunset, the Church of Reason would have you analyze the wavelengths of light, the atmospheric conditions, maybe even the psychological mechanisms that make humans find certain color combinations pleasing. All of that analysis might be technically correct, but somehow, in the process of cutting the sunset into these analytical pieces, you've lost the actual experience of beauty itself. The knife of rational analysis has carved up reality so thoroughly that we've forgotten how to see the whole. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, and this is something that resonates powerfully with our current moment. Pirsig isn't anti-rational or anti-scientific. He's not suggesting we throw out logic and analysis altogether. What he's critiquing is the elevation of rationality to the exclusion of everything else: intuition, emotion, direct experience, and what he calls quality, with a capital Q. It's like we've decided that the only valid way to know anything is through the scientific method, peer review, and academic approval. But what about the knowledge that comes from years of hands-on experience? What about the insights that emerge from quiet contemplation or creative play? Consider how this plays out in today's world. We live in an age of information overload, where we have access to more facts and data than any generation in human history. Yet somehow, we seem more confused and disconnected than ever before. We can Google any fact instantly, but we struggle with wisdom. We have sophisticated analytical tools, but we're experiencing a crisis of meaning. We've become incredibly good at taking things apart intellectually, but we've lost the ability to put them back together in ways that nourish the human spirit. Pirsig illustrates this with his own journey through academia. He describes how he excelled in the traditional academic system, earning advanced degrees and teaching at prestigious universities. But the more successful he became within the Church of Reason, the more alienated he felt from any real understanding or genuine learning. He was like a priest who had mastered all the rituals and doctrines, but had lost touch with the divine mystery that originally inspired the religion. This disconnect becomes even more apparent when Pirsig talks about his students' inability to write with any real voice or passion. They had been trained to write in the approved academic style, dry, impersonal, filled with jargon and empty of genuine insight. When he tried to encourage them to write about something they actually cared about, something from their own experience, they were lost. They had learned to mimic the language of authority, but they had never learned to trust their own perceptions or express their authentic thoughts. The parallel to our current educational system is striking. How many students graduate feeling like they've spent years learning to perform rather than actually learning to think or create? They've mastered the art of giving teachers what they want to hear, but they've never developed their own intellectual curiosity or creative voice. They've been trained to be consumers of prepackaged knowledge rather than creators of new understanding. But here's the beautiful thing about Pirsig's critique. He's not just tearing down the Church of Reason. He's pointing toward something richer and more complete. He's suggesting that real understanding comes from a marriage between rational analysis and direct, intuitive experience. It's not either-or, it's both-and. The motorcycle mechanic who can feel what's wrong with an engine, the teacher who can sense when a student is truly engaged, the artist who knows when a piece is finished. These people are integrating multiple ways of knowing in ways that pure rational analysis alone could never achieve. As we wrap up this exploration of the Church of Reason, it's worth asking ourselves, where in our own lives have we fallen into this trap of worshiping analysis at the expense of genuine understanding? How might we begin to trust our own experience and intuition alongside our rational faculties? These questions will become even more important as we continue deeper into Pirsig's philosophical journey, where he begins to outline his revolutionary concept of quality, a way of understanding that transcends the artificial divide between subjective and objective reality. Picture this. You're sitting in your garage on a Saturday morning, coffee steaming beside you, staring at your motorcycle that's been making that odd rattling sound for weeks. Most people would grumble, call a mechanic, and hand over their credit card. But what if I told you that this moment, this exact frustration, could be your doorway into something profound? What if the key to understanding life itself was sitting right there in your toolkit? This is where Robert Pirsig's revolutionary thinking begins to unfold, and honestly, it's going to change how you see everything from washing dishes to debugging code. See, Pirsig wasn't just writing about motorcycles when he penned Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. He was revealing something much deeper about how we can find meaning, presence, and even enlightenment in the most mundane tasks of our daily lives. Now think about this for a moment. When was the last time you were truly present while doing something ordinary? I mean really present, not thinking about your next meeting or scrolling through your phone. Pirsig discovered that motorcycle maintenance became his meditation hall, his church, his classroom all rolled into one. Every bolt he turned, every adjustment he made, became an opportunity to practice what Zen masters have taught for centuries: complete attention to the present moment. Here's what's fascinating about Pirsig's approach. He noticed that there were essentially two ways people related to technology and mechanical things. There were those who saw their motorcycle as a mysterious black box, something that either worked or didn't, and when it broke, well, that was someone else's problem. These folks would rather not get their hands dirty, preferring to maintain a romantic distance from the messy realities of how things actually function. Then there were others who dove deep into the classical understanding, who wanted to know exactly how every component worked, who found beauty in the logical systems and precise engineering. But Pirsig realized something revolutionary. Both approaches were missing something essential. The Romantics were missing the deep satisfaction that comes from truly understanding how things work, while the Classicists were often so focused on the technical details that they lost sight of the larger purpose, the quality, the soul of what they were doing. What if, he wondered, there was a third way? What if you could bring complete presence and mindfulness to technical work? What if fixing a motorcycle could be as spiritual as sitting in meditation? Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in practice. Imagine Pirsig in his garage, not rushing to get the job done, not frustrated by a stubborn bolt, but completely absorbed in the task at hand. He's feeling the resistance of the wrench, listening to the subtle sounds the engine makes, observing the color and consistency of the oil. He's not thinking about yesterday's problems or tomorrow's schedule. He's here now, fully engaged with this one mechanical puzzle in front of him. This is what Zen teachers mean when they talk about beginner's mind. Pirsig approached each mechanical problem as if he were encountering it for the first time, without preconceptions about what should or shouldn't work. He noticed that when he brought this quality of attention to his motorcycle maintenance, something magical happened. The work became less frustrating and more engaging. Problems that seemed impossible suddenly revealed their solutions. The boundary between himself and the machine began to dissolve. Now you might be thinking, that sounds nice, but I don't have a motorcycle and I'm not particularly mechanical. Here's the beautiful thing about Pirsig's insight. It applies to absolutely everything. Whether you're coding a website, cooking dinner, folding laundry, or having a difficult conversation with your teenager, the same principles apply. The question isn't what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. Consider how this plays out in our modern world. We're constantly multitasking, constantly distracted, always trying to optimize and efficiency our way through life. We've become experts at being somewhere else, mentally speaking, even when our bodies are present. But what if washing dishes could become a form of moving meditation? What if debugging that frustrating piece of code could teach you patience and systematic thinking? What if changing your oil could connect you more deeply to the machine that carries you through life? Pirsig discovered that when you bring genuine care and attention to any task, no matter how humble, the task begins to teach you things you never expected to learn. That stubborn bolt that won't budge. It's teaching you about persistence and finding creative solutions. The delicate adjustment that requires a gentle touch. It's showing you the value of sensitivity and finesse. The systematic diagnosis of a complex problem. It's developing your analytical skills and your ability to see patterns. But here's where it gets really interesting. Pirsig noticed that this mindful approach to practical tasks began to change his entire relationship with quality. He started to see that quality wasn't just something you added to a product or service afterward, like a coat of paint. Quality was something that emerged from the process itself, from the care and attention you brought to each moment of the work. Think about the difference between a meal prepared by someone who's rushing through the motions and one prepared by someone who's fully present, tasting as they go, adjusting seasonings with attention and care. Or consider the difference between a conversation where someone is just waiting for their turn to talk and one where they're genuinely listening, really hearing what the other person is saying. The quality difference is unmistakable, and it comes not from following a recipe or a script, but from bringing genuine presence to the activity. This is why Pirsig's insights feel so relevant today. In our age of artificial intelligence and automation, we might think that human attention to detail is becoming obsolete, but actually the opposite is true. As machines take over more routine tasks, our uniquely human capacity for presence, for bringing consciousness and care to whatever we're doing, becomes more valuable than ever. So the next time you find yourself faced with a mundane task, whether it's organizing your desk, troubleshooting your computer, or yes, even dealing with that rattling sound in your car, remember Pirsig's invitation. This isn't just a chore to get through as quickly as possible. This is an opportunity to practice presence, to develop patience, to discover something new about yourself and the world around you. This is your chance to find the Zen in the everyday, to transform ordinary moments into something extraordinary through the simple but profound act of paying attention. Picture this. You're sitting across from me with your favorite coffee, and I'm about to tell you about one of the most profound journeys of reconciliation ever written. Not just the reconciliation between a father and son, but between two ways of seeing the world that had been at war inside one man's mind for years. We've been traveling with Pirsig and his son Chris on their motorcycle journey across America, but now we're reaching something deeper than just miles on the road. This is where the rubber meets the road, literally and metaphorically, in understanding what it means to truly come home to yourself. You know that feeling when you've been running from something for so long that you forget what you were running from in the first place. That's where Pirsig finds himself as this journey nears its end. He's been wrestling with the ghost of his former self, the brilliant but tormented academic he calls Phaedrus, who had a complete mental breakdown years earlier while pursuing the deepest questions about quality and meaning. Now think about this for a moment. How many of us have parts of ourselves we've tried to bury or forget? Maybe it's a career path we abandoned, a relationship that ended badly, or simply a version of ourselves that felt too intense, too vulnerable, too much for the world to handle. Pirsig's journey is really about learning to integrate these shadow parts of ourselves rather than running from them. The motorcycle becomes more than just transportation here. It's a metaphor for the careful, patient work of putting yourself back together. Every bolt that needs tightening, every adjustment that needs making, mirrors the internal work of reconciliation. When Pirsig talks about motorcycle maintenance, he's really talking about the maintenance of the soul. Here's what's beautiful about this section. Pirsig realizes that his former self, Phaedrus, wasn't his enemy. Phaedrus was the part of him that dared to ask the biggest questions. who refused to accept shallow answers about what makes life meaningful. The breakdown happened not because Phaedrus was wrong, but because he was trying to solve the unsolvable through pure intellect alone. Think about our world today, where we're constantly told we need to optimize, hack, and systematize our way to happiness. We've got productivity apps, meditation apps, fitness trackers, all trying to quantify and control the unquantifiable mystery of being human. Pirsig's insight cuts right through this modern obsession. He discovers that quality, that sense of rightness and beauty in life, can't be captured in formulas or systems. It has to be lived, experienced, felt in the moment of doing good work with your hands, or having a real conversation, or simply being present with what's in front of you. The reconciliation with his son Chris becomes a mirror for this larger reconciliation with himself. Throughout their journey, Chris has been difficult, moody, resistant. Sound familiar? How often do our children or the people closest to us reflect back our own unresolved conflicts? Chris isn't just being a difficult teenager. He's responding to his father's internal division, sensing the war between the analytical professor and the man who just wants to connect with his son on a simple motorcycle ride. As Pirsig begins to accept rather than fight his past, something shifts in his relationship with Chris too. It's like watching ice melt in spring. The rigid defenses start to soften, and underneath, there's just love. Not perfect love, not Hallmark card love, but the messy, complicated, real love between two human beings who are trying to figure out how to be in the world together. Here's where Pirsig's insights become incredibly practical for us today. In our hyperconnected, always-on world, we've lost touch with what he calls the peace of mind which is not at peace. This isn't the false peace of avoiding problems or the artificial calm of meditation apps. It's the deeper peace that comes from accepting the fundamental uncertainty and complexity of existence, while still showing up fully to do the work in front of you. Consider how this applies to your own life. Maybe you're struggling with a career decision, a relationship challenge, or just the general anxiety of modern existence. Pirsig's journey suggests that the answer isn't in finding the perfect system or philosophy. It's in developing what he calls gumption, that combination of enthusiasm and common sense that keeps you engaged with life even when things get complicated. The motorcycle maintenance becomes a practice of presence. When you're adjusting a carburetor or changing oil, you can't be anywhere else. You have to be right there, paying attention to what the machine is telling you. This is meditation in action, mindfulness without the spiritual packaging. It's about developing an intimate relationship with the physical world and trusting that this relationship will teach you what you need to know. As the journey winds toward its end, we see Pirsig integrating the best of both worlds, the analytical rigor of his academic past and the grounded wisdom that comes from working with your hands and staying present with what's real. He doesn't reject thinking, but he puts it in its proper place, as one tool among many for navigating life. The reconciliation isn't a destination you arrive at once and for all. It's an ongoing practice, like motorcycle maintenance itself. Every day, you check the oil, adjust what needs adjusting, and pay attention to how things are running. Some days everything hums along perfectly. Other days, you break down on the side of the road and have to figure out what's wrong. This is perhaps Pirsig's greatest gift to us, the understanding that the journey itself is the destination, that the quality we're seeking isn't somewhere else waiting to be found, but right here in how we choose to engage with whatever we're doing right now. Whether that's having coffee with a friend, fixing something that's broken, or simply riding down an open road with someone you love, paying attention to the world as it unfolds around you. And with that wisdom tucked into our back pocket like a well-worn road map, we're ready to see how this journey of reconciliation changes everything about how we understand the art of living well. Welcome back to our journey through Robert Pirsig's remarkable meditation on life, technology, and the search for meaning. Pour yourself that second cup of coffee because We're about to dive into one of the most profound sections of this philosophical odyssey. We've been traveling alongside the narrator and his son Chris on their motorcycle journey across America, but today we're venturing into territory that's even more expansive than the Montana plains they're crossing. We're exploring what Pirsig calls quality as the container of the soul itself. Now think about this for a moment. When was the last time you encountered something that just felt right? Maybe it was a perfectly prepared meal at a small cafe, or the way sunlight filtered through your window this morning, or even the satisfying click of a well-made tool. There's something about these experiences that goes beyond mere function or appearance. They possess what Pirsig is getting at when he talks about quality with a capital Q, but here's where things get fascinating and a little mind-bending. Pirsig isn't just talking about good craftsmanship or aesthetic beauty. He's suggesting that quality is actually the fundamental reality that contains everything else, including what we typically think of as our souls or essential selves. Imagine for a moment that you're standing in an art museum, looking at a painting that absolutely captivates you. Most of us would say we're experiencing the painting's quality, as if quality were some property the painting possesses. But Pirsig is proposing something far more radical. He's suggesting that in that moment of pure aesthetic experience, before your mind starts categorizing and analyzing, you're not experiencing the quality of the painting. Instead, you and the painting are both arising within quality itself. You're not separate from it, observing it from the outside. You're part of the same dynamic event of quality manifesting in the world. This isn't just philosophical wordplay, though it might sound like it at first. Consider how this plays out in your daily life. When you're completely absorbed in an activity, whether it's cooking, playing music, writing, or even fixing something that's broken, there are moments when the boundary between you and what you're doing seems to dissolve. You're not thinking about yourself doing the activity. You're not even thinking about the activity itself. There's just this seamless flow of engagement. Musicians call it being in the zone. Athletes talk about flow states. Pirsig is saying these aren't just psychological phenomena. They're glimpses of the fundamental structure of reality itself, moments when we experience quality directly rather than through the filter of subject-object thinking. But here's where Pirsig's insight becomes even more intriguing and relevant to our modern predicament. He argues that our culture has become trapped in what he calls the subject-object metaphysics. We've convinced ourselves that reality consists of subjects, like ourselves, observing and manipulating objects, like the world around us. This seems so natural and obvious that we rarely question it. Yet Pirsig suggests this way of thinking is actually a relatively recent historical development, and it's causing us tremendous problems. Think about how this plays out in our relationship with technology today. We approach our smartphones, our computers, our cars as objects to be manipulated for our subjective purposes. We've lost touch with what Pirsig calls the quality relationship, where we engage with these things as partners in creating something worthwhile rather than mere tools for our convenience. When someone lovingly maintains an old motorcycle, carefully adjusting each component and listening to how the engine responds, they're not just fixing an object. They're participating in a quality event that includes both the person and the machine in a larger harmony. This perspective offers a completely different way of understanding what we mean by soul or consciousness. Rather than thinking of the soul as some separate, immaterial substance that somehow inhabits our bodies, Pirsig is suggesting that what we call soul is actually our capacity to participate in quality events. It's our ability to engage with the world in ways that create value, meaning, and excellence. The soul isn't something we have. It's something we do, or rather, something that happens through us when we align ourselves with quality. Now, you might be wondering how this applies to the mundane realities of contemporary life. After all, most of us aren't motorcycle mechanics or philosophers. We're dealing with emails and deadlines and grocery shopping, and trying to figure out how to live well in a world that often seems designed to prevent exactly that. But this is precisely where Pirsig's insight becomes most practical and urgent. Consider the difference between approaching your work as mere labor versus approaching it as an opportunity to manifest quality. When you're writing an email, you can either bang out something functional that gets the job done, or you can take a moment to consider how to communicate with clarity and care. When you're preparing a meal, you can either mechanically follow a recipe, or you can engage with the ingredients, the process, the people who will eat the food as a complete quality event. The external results might not always be dramatically different, but the internal experience, and often the actual outcomes, transform completely. This isn't about perfectionism or adding more pressure to already stressful lives. In fact, it's quite the opposite. When we approach activities from the perspective of quality, we often find that the anxious self-consciousness that makes everything feel like a struggle begins to dissolve. We're no longer performing for some imagined audience or trying to meet some external standard. We're simply participating in the ongoing creation of value and meaning. Pirsig's vision of quality as the container of the soul offers us a way out of the isolation and alienation that characterizes so much of modern experience. Instead of seeing ourselves as separate subjects trying to manipulate an indifferent world of objects, we can recognize ourselves as expressions of the same underlying quality that manifests in everything from a perfectly tuned engine to a moment of genuine human connection. As we continue this journey with Pirsig and his son through the American landscape, we're really traveling through the geography of consciousness itself, discovering that the quality of our attention and engagement isn't just what makes life worth living. It's what makes life itself possible in any meaningful sense. And in that recognition, something that might truly be called the soul begins to emerge, not as a possession, but as a way of being fully present to the endless creativity of existence itself. Picture this. You're sitting across from me with your favorite mug, steam rising between us, and I'm about to tell you about one of the most profound endings in philosophical literature. We've been journeying together through Robert Pirsig's mind-bending exploration of quality, technology, and what it means to truly live. And now we're reaching that moment where everything comes together like pieces of a puzzle you didn't even know you were solving. The end of Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance isn't just about reaching a destination on a map. It's about arriving at a completely new understanding of yourself and the world around you. Think about the last time you finished a really challenging project, maybe renovating a room in your house or learning a difficult skill. Remember that moment when you stepped back and realized you weren't the same person who started. That's exactly what happens to Pirsig and his son Chris as their motorcycle journey draws to a close. Throughout this incredible ride, we've watched Pirsig wrestle with his past, with his alter ego Phaedrus, and with the fundamental question of what makes life worth living. Now, as the miles wind down, something beautiful happens. The integration begins. All those philosophical concepts about quality, about the relationship between classical and romantic understanding, about how we approach technology and craftsmanship, they start to crystallize into lived wisdom. Here's what's so powerful about this conclusion. Pirsig doesn't tie everything up in a neat bow. Real life isn't like that, is it? Instead, he shows us something far more valuable. He demonstrates how the journey itself has been the teacher. Every breakdown of the motorcycle, every moment of frustration with maintenance, every philosophical rabbit hole they've explored together, it's all been preparing them for this moment of clarity. Now think about this for a second. How often do we rush through experiences, always focused on the destination? We're constantly asking, are we there yet? Whether we're talking about our careers, our relationships, or even our morning commute. But Pirsig's revelation is that the there we're seeking isn't a place at all. It's a way of being present with whatever we're doing right now. The relationship between father and son, which has been strained and complex throughout the book, begins to heal in these final pages. It's not through some grand gesture or dramatic conversation, but through the simple act of shared experience and mutual understanding. Chris begins to see his father not as the distant, sometimes difficult man he's been traveling with, but as someone who's been on his own journey of discovery. And Pirsig begins to see Chris not just as his son, but as his own person with his own relationship to quality and meaning. This reminds me of how we often approach the people closest to us. We think we know them completely, but we're usually seeing them through the lens of our own needs and expectations. The motorcycle journey strips away those assumptions. When you're dealing with mechanical problems in the middle of nowhere, or camping under the stars night after night, pretenses fall away. You start seeing each other as fellow travelers rather than just family roles. But here's where it gets really interesting. The philosophical integration that happens isn't just intellectual, it's deeply practical. Pirsig has learned to approach his motorcycle, and by extension all technology in his life, with what he calls gumption. It's this beautiful combination of enthusiasm, confidence, and respect for the work itself. When something breaks down, instead of cursing the machine or feeling defeated, he approaches it as an opportunity to engage more deeply with the world. Can you imagine applying this attitude to your smartphone when it's acting up, or to your car when it needs maintenance? Instead of seeing these moments as interruptions to your real life, what if you saw them as invitations to practice presence and problem solving? This isn't about becoming a mechanic. It's about changing your fundamental relationship with the tools and technology that surround you. The concept of quality that has driven the entire philosophical exploration finally reveals itself not as something you can define or capture, but as something you recognize when you're in relationship with it. It's like trying to explain the color blue to someone who's never seen it. You can't really do it with words, but you know it instantly when you see it. Quality emerges in the space between you and whatever you're engaged with, whether that's fixing an engine, writing a sentence, or having a conversation with someone you love. As the journey concludes, there's this sense of beginning rather than ending. Pirsig and Chris aren't the same people who set out on this trip. They've been changed by the miles, by the breakdowns, by the long conversations and comfortable silences. But more than that, they've developed a new way of seeing that they'll carry forward into whatever comes next. This is the real gift of the book's ending. It doesn't promise that life will suddenly become easy or that all problems will disappear. Motorcycles will still break down. Relationships will still be challenging. Technology will still frustrate us. But we can approach all of these experiences with a different quality of attention, a different way of being present. The practical wisdom here extends far beyond motorcycle maintenance into every corner of modern life. Whether you're debugging code, preparing a meal, or helping your child with homework, the principles remain the same. Approach the task with respect. Pay attention to what's actually happening rather than what you think should be happening, and trust that engaging fully with the process will teach you what you need to know. As we close this incredible journey together, remember that every ending is also a beginning. The insights you've gained from traveling alongside Pirsig aren't meant to stay in this book. They're meant to ride with you into your own daily adventures, transforming how you see everything from your morning coffee routine to your most challenging relationships. The motorcycle may be parked, but the real journey is just getting started. Robert Pirsig's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is a profound exploration of the intersection between technology, philosophy, and the human experience. At its core, the book is a narrative about a father-son motorcycle trip that doubles as a philosophical exploration of what Pirsig calls quality. The journey serves as a backdrop to the protagonist's internal dialogue about the dichotomy between the romantic view of life, which appreciates the beauty of the world, and the classical view, which seeks to understand it through rational analysis. Here are some key actionable takeaways from the book. 1. Embrace the journey, not just the destination. Pirsig illustrates that life is about the journey and not merely reaching the endpoint. To apply this, start incredibly small by focusing on the process of achieving your goals each day, rather than obsessing over the end results. Cultivate patience and presence in each step you take. 2. Integrate mind and emotion. The book stresses the importance of balancing rational thinking with emotional experiences. Practically, start by setting aside moments to reflect on how you feel about your decisions alongside the logical aspects, nurturing a holistic view of your everyday experiences. 3. Pursue quality over quantity. Quality is an ongoing pursuit, not a static goal. Begin by assessing the value you place on different aspects of your life. This might mean prioritizing deep, meaningful connections over numerous superficial ones, or focusing on mastering a skill rather than chasing multiple hobbies. 4. Question conventional wisdom. Pirsig challenges readers to think critically about accepted norms. Apply this by questioning assumptions you hold in your daily life. Start by picking one belief each week to examine and research, opening yourself up to new perspectives. 5. Find balance in life's dualities. The book's philosophical discussions reveal the need to balance opposing forces, such as freedom and stability. Practically, identify areas in your life where you might be leaning too far in one direction and make small adjustments to bring more balance and harmony. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below with at least one idea from this book that stuck with you, one concept you're going to carry forward. It could be something that challenged your thinking, something you want to try, or even something you disagreed with. Your insight might be exactly what another listener needs to hear today. And if this summary gave you something valuable, a new perspective, a spark of motivation, or even just a peaceful hour with your coffee, share it with someone who might need it too. Subscribe to One Book, One Coffee, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new summary. Every week, we sit down together with one great book, one warm cup of coffee, and the simple belief that wisdom, shared well, can change lives. Until next time, keep reading, keep growing, and remember, every small step counts. See you at the next book.